Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. My name is Nick Zentner. I'm a geology teacher here at the local university, Central Washington University. And I'm so pleased to be with you this evening, live. The local time is 6:41, and we're going to start a little program at 7 o'clock. And I'm checking the live chat to make sure oh boy, really? Are we 5x5? We are? I've got the live chat right on Larry the Ladder right behind the camera, so I'm looking just barely up. Okay, good. Okay. So we are front loading this evening. I want to talk about Starlink and my practice with the equipment now. We'll say hi to a few folks as well. And then, yes, at 7 p.m., which was the announced time for this little program, I do have some things for you today, but I'll save that for the top of the hour. So I got myself cut off there and distracted. The local time is 6:42. And if you're watching this in replay and you want to skip ahead to the beginning of the program, I guess that means that's 18 minutes from now. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Skip ahead 18 minutes. And I'm taking the time now to actually go in and put a little chapter so I can mark exactly on the playback when the program begins. That's me going in after the fact and saying, Livestream begins. And I learned this from somebody, I can't remember who, so thanks for that. And then I have the timestamp for when the lecture begins, and then I do a timestamp for when the live Q&A begins. And if anything else weird happens, I suppose I'll put a timestamp in for that. So we're starting a little early is my point, and we have 230 right now watching. And that's in part because we just did this last night. That's also in part because I scheduled this 6 hours ago or something like that. So I'm trying to practice and remember how to schedule something many hours in advance as opposed to just turning the thing on as I have been doing lately. Let's say hi to a few, and then I'll go in and grab a beer, and we can just visit a little bit more like that. Where are you viewing from? Can I say hi to you? And what is your local time, especially if you are in another continent? Lincoln City, Fabian, Alberta, hello. Edgewood, New Mexico, West Dallas, Wisconsin, Puyallup, Washington, Ritzville, Washington, balmy San Diego, hello, Nina. Cincinnati, Ohio, Sausalito, California. I'm going to practice reading from the scroll right behind the camera here. Southwest Montana, San Antonio, Texas. Sharon from Malaga. Hello, Sharon. Kamloops, BC. Well, that doesn't work because I can't control it. For some reason, it's scrolling much faster and more jerky on the other iPad. Scrolling more jerky. What? So I guess I prefer the old Etch-a-Sketch here. Centralia, Washington. I'll hold it right here. Philomath, there's Kirk. Boulder, Colorado. Boring, Oregon. Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Is it Pleasant? Firestone, Colorado. Go Badgers. Downtown Seattle. At the fault, says Michael. And Yuki wants to know if I have audio on. I am right. There's 3 or 4 people asking about my microphone. We are good, right? Are we functional? I'm going to ask one more time. And if we are, I'm going to go in and grab a beer. Thank you, Don. I'll be back in a second. Hot mic. This episode of Geology in the Backyard is brought to you by Drew Brew. Drew Brew, that's the brewery. The Kolsch, the German-style golden ale. I'm not much of an IPA person, so I've been taught by my wife about so many things, including hoppy beers, whatever. So she's not into hoppy beers. I guess she's trained me as well. So let's get some audio on this. Oh, yeah. Happy summer, everybody. Here's to you. Here's to you. Here's to you. Yeah, that is nice. I think it's a brewery up at Snoqualmie Pass, and if it's not, then they're in Cle Elum, but Upper County, Upper Kittitas County. Okay, as promised, before we start the program in 13 minutes, I'd like to talk about the Starlink stuff because that's my motivation here. So if you missed last night, I have a purpose to regularly practice with Starlink. And if I get you over here, this is the Starlink dish, pretty much in the same place that it was last night, but tonight it's kind of finicky. It's saying it's trying to read for obstructions, and it says it's going to take 6 hours to continue to read for obstructions. Like, I'm confused by that. And it's also saying it's downloading an update at the same time, so that can't be great. So part of my testing is just trying to troubleshoot any kind of strange things that start happening with this. I plugged everything into the portable station. Thanks again to Mike in Seattle, who got me rolling with all this stuff. So Mike told me exactly which power supply to purchase, because again, I'm practicing here in the backyard, but I'm eventually going out on the road, in the field, in remote spots, maybe at the Mondovi Horseshoe at some point. I don't know. But I have a purpose to be using this Starlink thing for real with professional geologists at the Penrose Conference in Idaho in August. And so I want to get my reps in to do that. But I don't just want to test. I want to share these things I've been learning, and I'll make sure that you know exactly what I'm talking about for tonight. But much of tonight is right off of what we did last night because of all the incredible feedback from many of you. I'm still... Okay, so what did I learn? I watched the replay. Thank you for those that were with us last night. Apparently, it's customary if you use a Starlink dish every 20 minutes or something to get passed from one satellite to the next. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But Steve, Techie Steve, who was helpful in the olden days, like 3 years ago with wireless, Steve was helping me realize that I do have this ability now to broadcast from anywhere using the Starlink satellites, but I do need to be prepared for the fact that there's going to be garbled, pixelated video. I don't know. I guess you can all help me, or maybe you'll email me this if you happen to know about Starlink details. But I did notice last night, especially when I was that portion when I was about done with the program, and I think I was done with the live Q&A, and somebody asked about the Penrose Conference in Idaho, and it was a mess. People lost the audio. Maybe I froze video-wise. I'm not quite sure from last night. In replay, it's always a little better than it was in real time, but a bunch of you, including Jeff from Vinmans, who was watching from 2 blocks away, I think Jeff eventually figured out that if he left the video and then came back, then the audio came back. Or maybe you just hit refresh on your browser or your phone or whatever you're watching. But that's going to be something that I continue to learn about. And I can't stop the program when I see that there's a little pixelation. I just got to keep rolling. So I guess that's, without knowing anything different, I guess that's just going to be part of the part of this world, this Starlink world, until they have more satellites up there or whatever else. So that was the thing. And I guess if this happens again, or if it's already happened tonight and you lose sound or something, you can kind of coach up each other. Yeah, I see Carol saying hit refresh brought you back. Unchained, we expect. That's what I did. Yeah. So, in the live chat right now, and if you watch this in replay and you see the live chat comments or maybe a comment or two below, that's one beautiful thing about this community. People are helping each other kind of navigate some of this stuff. Some of our viewers don't even know what the live chat is. How do I see the live, everything on the spectrum between pro and rookie. And I'm pretty low on the techie scale. That's pretty obvious if you're a longtime viewer. And yet I've been having a blast learning a bunch of new stuff. I am, using a wireless network that's created by a Starlink dish that I didn't have even last year. I've got an Ethernet cable going right from Starlink into the brain computer. There's all sorts of amazing advances forward. 8 minutes before we start, what else did I want to say? The lighting, I like this lighting better. I happened to notice it, when we were wrapping up last night. And so I'm not totally tucked into the shed. We get the tracking off and spin you around a little bit, I guess. So last night I had the brain computer right here under the shelter. Now the brain computer's out and in the wind a little bit. It's not very breezy though. Didn't really grassed. This is me being picky now, but I've had enough experience with being on camera and everything that I've learned from camera people over the years. So I like this kind of even lighting, and just happened to know from last night that, once we get past 7 o'clock, the sun is behind the shed and it's kind of nice. What else can I show you here? I don't know much. Oh, the raspberries are starting to come on. That's kind of nice. I've been instructed to pick raspberries until Liz gets home Tuesday night. I'm not really into it, but I try to be a good person. Yeah. Oh, I got my Wisconsin and Spokane pens ready. But yeah, I do like being this close to the brain computer so that I can see a live picture without a delay. And that's one other thing I wanted to try. How much time do I have? Yeah, we have time. Let me get back. I think I have. This is one of the Ceremonic lavalier mics that is using Bluetooth to connect between the transmitter and the receiver. And I think I've successfully gotten the other one going as well. So I'm going to turn this one off and then turn on the other one and make sure that that one works as well. So this one's going off right now. Okay. Can you hear red? I was on the blue mic. Can you hear the red? Red, yes. Red 5x5. Red, yes. Red 5x5. Thank you. Okay, good. Well, that works. And even if I have both on, it doesn't matter. Okay, good. I'll stick with red tonight. All right, we got 4 minutes left. The tracking camera is probably pointless, but let's say hi to let's see, anything else I wanted to. So I'm not doing the Starlink techie stuff talk at the end. I guess that's all I wanted to share about the Starlink stuff. Let's say hi to a few more folks, and then I have to start getting my head right for tonight's show. James is in Selah, Washington, Menominee, Missouri, Stockton, California, Red Deer, Alberta, Issaquah, Washington, Southeast Tennessee, Siloam Springs, Arkansas, New York State, Klamath Falls, Oregon, Albany, Oregon. I get that. I actually got that. Flathead Valley of Montana, Wenatchee, Washington, Madison, Wisconsin, Watertown, Minnesota. Jerome Lessman is here. Hey, Jerome. Somebody's saying hi to you. Who is that? Northwoods 3D. I believe that's Joanne. That's fun. New Zealand. Dr. NZ from New Zealand. Hello. Okay, good. Yeah, it's just real pleasant to be with you. And I'm going to leave town tomorrow morning, and I want to keep going with this, but the earliest time I'd be doing this would be Thursday, and it might be Friday or Saturday. But I think I'll continue with these little Harley Brett's reports. I continue to really enjoy learning about that. Okay, give me 2 minutes to get my head right, and then we shall begin. Hot mic. All right, don't spill the beer. Don't spill the beer on the papers. Don't spill the beer on the papers. Start with yeah. Start with, then go to the emails. Go to the maps. Pretty good. Well, a pleasant good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us from here in the backyard of Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Tonight, we are continuing to talk about J. Harlan Bretz, geologist from the University of Chicago, who was here in the 1920s, every summer, more or less, publishing Ice Age floods papers. Now, what's the title of this program tonight? The Mondovi Horseshoe, a name I made up last night. So 24 hours ago, I was here with some of you live, and maybe some of you have seen the replay of that since that time. Maybe. But if you didn't, and you're starting cold with this one, what is the Mondovi Horseshoe? If you Google Mondovi Horseshoe, you're not going to find anything except for this live stream, I guess, tomorrow. What is it? Well, last night I told the story of being impressed by this map by J. Harlan Bretz, published in 1928, and I've got all sorts of gory detail, brand new stuff that came by email just a few hours ago about this map. But let me keep zooming in for you. And last night I was honing in on Spokane, Washington. I'll do it this way. Spokane, Washington, here, John Stockton's house. But the Mondovi Horseshoe is this doohickey right here. And all I did last night was show this exactly the way I'm doing this right now. And what is underneath my fingers right now? It's an ice sheet that came down from Canada. When did it come down? 130,000 years ago. That's the number that I'm rolling with until proven otherwise, okay? 130,000 years ago, not 18,000 years ago, but 130,000 years ago, the Spokane ice sheet. Some of you have heard it a million times already. You're tired of me talking about it. But if I keep looking at this map, and I know that this is not the Wisconsin ice sheet, not the red ice sheet, not the Wisconsin advancing over the border 20,000 years ago and less, but instead being the blue ice sheet, the Spokane ice sheet, the penultimate ice sheet that crossed the border 130,000 years ago or before maybe, suddenly I'm now interested in this margin, this very specific southern edge of the Spokane ice sheet. And in particular, I'm interested in that horseshoe. So there's a little town called Davenport you can see. There's a little town called Reardon you can see possibly. And you can even possibly see the name Mondovi. It's not even a town. There's like one cool old historic town, this house in this little ravine next to the railroad tracks. That's it. That's Mondovi. And Pleasant View Cemetery, I stopped there and filmed an intro to a video last Tuesday. And as I told the story last night, then I finally started driving around in this place that looks like it's part of the Mondovi Horseshoe, as I'm calling it. And I couldn't really tell where the glacial till was or was it not, and what evidence Brett's had for the Spokane glaciation. Okay, so I've defined what it is. That's the topic tonight. Well, this is an old map of Washington that I've used forever. I inherited it from Don Ring, longtime geology professor here. And this, some old-time geologists would do this. They would take a geologic map and they'd cut it into pieces, and then they'd mount it on whatever this is called. I'm sure some of you might know what this is called, what kind of material this is. But it is quite handy to have this. So I always have this old map next to me. Can I show you the Mondovi Horseshoe on this map, which was published in 1960? There it is. And these guys have the Mondovi Horseshoe in Scabland. That orange with the little red V's is exposed basalt. So if you want an answer for why it looks like a horseshoe on these maps and why Brett's mapped it that way, you're not going to get it tonight. It's still a mystery to me. But that gets us to why I was excited to do this again with you tonight. I got 35 emails last night and today from a bunch of you guys who watched last night's show. And a bunch of you were on Google Earth zooming around Mondovi trying to figure out what that horseshoe was, what that edge of the Spokane ice sheet was with Harley Bretz in 1923, 1927, 1928. And some of you said, I think you were off a little bit, and I think I'm off, and I can't quite tell. So I have some more detailed imagery on maps from Brett's about the Horseshoe and a little backstory on the Horseshoe and when that Mondovi Horseshoe shows up for the first time. And that gets me to Sharon from Malaga, who's watching right now, live. And Sharon continues to come through with search engines and newspaper clippings. She now has a beautiful timeline put together for us, year by year, with Brett's and with T.C. Chamberlain and with Thomas Large and with all these characters. And not to be outdone by Sharon, Ian, I don't know if you're watching tonight, but I got an email at noon today from Ian. And he found, I'm going to read some of the letters to you tonight. He found letters going back and forth between J. Harlan Bretz and the director of the New York City, oh boy, Isaiah Bowman, director of the American Geophysical Society. And Ian somehow this morning found all these letters. I think it was the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee library site or something, Ian. But there's all sorts of back and forth between Bretz and Bowman, Chicago, New York, Chicago, Bretz and Bowman. And Bretz is talking about his field seasons and trying to get Bowman to agree to make a colorful map, the one that I've been obsessed about. So there's plenty to share with you, both a kind of a personal history part of this, giving context for this work by Bretz, but also a little bit more detail on the geology itself. But make no mistake, we're not going to answer a bunch of questions tonight, except, of course, we're going to do some live Q&A, and many of your live questions or comments down below, if you watch the replay, are also extremely valuable to me. So it's not like a lot of people notice what I'm doing. Certainly in the ivory tower, people aren't really paying attention. They're unwilling or unable to recognize what I'm doing, the worth in it. And that's fine. I don't, it's not surprising to me. But even people in town and other people that I'm related to even don't really pay much attention to this. They know I'm doing some YouTube stuff, but that's about it. They don't watch. And that's totally fine also. But if I ever am really asked by somebody, like, why are you doing all this egotistical stuff in your backyard, looking into a camera all the time? And one of the answers is, there's a community of people who have time and expertise, and they can find stuff, especially this historical stuff. I mean, the stuff that Ian found this morning, I don't know if anybody knows about that stuff. I've certainly never seen those letters, and I just scanned them a couple of times, Ian. So this is a back and forth, a give and take between you and me, and it's just energizing and electrifying. And this is all in the context of me putting some Ice Age Floods programs together, I guess for real, this coming winter with an A to Z series and probably some downtown lectures next spring. Probably just do a bunch of Brett's lectures. I don't know. There's a lot of meat on this bone here. Okay. So we are coming to some live Q&A, but for right now, can I double check, make sure that we're 5 by 5? Dan says we got more than 750 watching right now. That's kind of fun. And looks like we're okay. Thank you. Okay, good. So how can I do this? How can I do this? This map in 1928, the colorful map that we're really going to be talking about a lot tonight. Notice it's from the Geographical Review, and that's the publication apparently of this guy, Isaiah Bowman in New York City. So this was a big deal to create this map. And okay, before I forget, I don't know if you're going to be distracted right now or not, but I want to say this before I forget. You now have this map. You have access to this map, and here's how. Go to nickzentner.com, click on the promo code Harley, and that will get you to the word floods in the upper right-hand corner. If I had OBS working, I'd go to it right now and I'd show you how to operate the site. But whatever, you'll just have to take notes from me, okay? nickzentner.com. That's a website. It's where all my stuff is. The word floods is in the upper right-hand corner. Click on the word floods, and there's some scientific papers there, all written by J. Harlan Bretz. And I have papers from the 1923, 1924, 1925 from Bretz up until this morning. And then I decided I needed to put more of Bretz's papers on for tonight's show. So, new to the site as of today is 1927. This is Bretz talking about the details of the ambush meeting, which I've referred to a regular amount by now. I still haven't done a proper program on it, but you can read exactly what Bretz said in January of 1927 in Washington, D.C. You can read the actual words of the USGS men, as he calls them, who were not buying what he was selling, and it got ugly. And there were secretaries in the room, I assume a couple of well-dressed women of the day, typing everything out or taking shorthand or whatever. So that's waiting for you at nickzentner.com. There are 3 1928 papers, and that's what we're going to use tonight. This is after the ambush meeting. He gets all this criticism. He gets pretty fired up, Bretz does. He heads back out here in the summer of 1927, and he just goes apeshit. He just doubles down on everything. He remaps. He knows exactly what he needs to find to shut these guys up. At least he's thinking that. And so this is Alternate Hypotheses for Channeled Scabland Part 1. And as a separate paper on my website, but I've stapled it together here. So let me just find the second part. Can I do it quickly, please? Let's not have a stalled out thing like I had last night, for Christ's sake. Oh my God. There's a part 2. Where is it? Hang on. I don't know if you ever taught school and you're with the audio visual and there's a room full of people staring at you as you're fumbling. It just makes it worse. That's my experience. So this is like that. Shit, I can't find part 2. Whatever. There's part 2. And then there's also this, which is a new 1928 paper that corresponds to the map. So if you get to this last, the bottom of the papers I have waiting for you at my website, I think I just Scabland color map. So it's a paper, but then when you get to the end of the paper, this is in a PDF that you can get on my computer. You can download this color map in pieces, in sections. And this is what I did 15 years ago when I was doing all that stuff with Tom Foster down in Pasco. I'm like, hey, Tom, I found this old map, and I literally scotch taped the thing together. And that's what I've been using ever since. So it's this colorful map where he first shows the Mondovi Horseshoe. He never calls it that, but it's this cute whoop-de-doo that did not appear in his earlier maps. That's what I want to do next with you. Disheveled. I can't find what I thought I was going to be able to find. So still rusty on some of the detail here. I can turn on track, I guess. Keep up with what I'm trying to show you. I think his first field season, Bretz, was 1922. Oh, interesting. I turned on tracking and it started pixelating. I'm sorry, that's just another thing real quick. A few of you commented that if there's a bunch of movement, Starlink has trouble. Like the pixelation sometimes is not just because we're changing satellites, but because I'm doing some abrupt stuff and the compression or something's having a hard time. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay. So the first field season for J. Harlan Bretz and maybe a couple of his University of Chicago grad students, they took a train out to Spokane. They borrowed a car from Thomas Large. They also walked a fair amount, and they made this relatively crude map from the field season of 1922. There's no horseshoe on this thing. But even 1922, Bretz has a Spokane ice advance and then a much younger, wimpier Wisconsin ice sheet. 1923, however, he spends, I think it's a total of 10 weeks. 10 weeks without a car. 10 weeks on foot. Summer of 1923, exactly 100 years ago, right now. And I colored it. Let me hold it for, oh, shit. So if you've seen this map before, this is the 1923 version. And my color scheme is blue, of course, for the Spokane ice. The brown is the naked basalt, that's the scabland. And the white with the cute little yellow trim are the loose islands. And the black are the amazing pockmarked deep holes, rock basins with lakes sitting in them. This is before the irrigation project. So there's a bunch of lakes out there in the desert, even before all sorts of irrigation. But you'll notice there's no horseshoe. Here's Davenport in purple. And he's got no horseshoe up here. He's got no Mondovi horseshoe. He doesn't have a Mondovi, does he? Yeah, he does. He's got Mondovi on this thing, but he's got no horseshoe. I know this is not the best. Once I get OBS going, I need Nat's help. Get OBS going again, then I can switch cameras and show you something more professionally. So I apologize for that. Okay, so the map I just showed you is coming from this, which you also have at the website, summarizing those incredible 10 weeks of field work on foot exactly 100 years ago. And I'm going to continue to basically teach right out of this 1923 paper. But what am I building on or building toward? I'm building toward the ambush meeting where everybody has specific criticism for Bretz. It affects him. But immediately that summer, the summer of 1927, he goes right back to that southern edge of the Spokane ice sheet and he remaps it. And that's the one I can't find. I hope I can find it. I want to read you some passages from his paper that was published the following year, 1928. But the highlights are Bretz remapped by Mondovi. He moved the ice sheet north a little bit. And he put in the horseshoe for the first time. He moved it just a mile or two to the north, but he was covering a couple of those ridges for the first time, a couple of those divides for the first time. He was dropping north into the Spokane River for the first time, and he's starting to get some trees and probably a bunch of wheat fields that conceal some of the geology. I don't know. But our topic tonight, the Mondovi horseshoe, is this little horseshoe that marks a very weird portion of the southern margin of the Spokane ice sheet. And just in case you're losing the big picture of why I continue to get into this, there's a guy watching right now from Vancouver Island University, unless he's on vacation somewhere, Jerome Lessman. And Jerome Lessman right now in 2023 is co-authoring a paper. It has not been published yet. Hopefully it'll be published next year. Jerome Lessman and Joel Gombiner are combining forces to write a new paper on the origin of Moses Coulee and their mechanism for getting a bunch of Ice Age floodwater into Moses Coulee is to have it come out from underneath an ice sheet. And that's what Bretz has over at Mondovi. And all the rest of these places on this map. I mean, look at this. This is still 1923. But there's no talk of shunting water along the front of a moving ice sheet. He's got a bunch of channels coming right out from the front of the ice sheet. And if this is worth revisiting and saying, is this really true? Is all the data that Brett's had in the 1920s true for this area between Spokane and the Grand Coulee Dam? And there's tons of there's tons of subglacial flow channels coming out from the front of the ice sheet here. Then why wouldn't we have that for Grand Coulee and Moses Coulee as well? That's the ultimate reason that I'm so into this, because I've been led this way from Brian Atwater kind of by accident, from Vic Baker kind of by accident, and Jerome Lessman by accident. Not by accident, on purpose. Okay, how we doing? I'm going to start reading some things to you if I can find the right paper, and I want to read some of this stuff that Ian found by email, and then we'll go to your live questions and answers. Hang on. That's part one. Where is part two, dumbass? I really don't have it out here. I got it. Woo! Here's part two, right. Okay. So when you go to nickzentner.com, maybe you're there right now, I don't know. Here's part one of the alternatives hypotheses for channeled scablands, 1920, published in 28, but written after the field season of 1927. And I'm confident of that because of Ian's letters. But here's part two, and you have this as a separate paper on my website, but I'm going to start right here. And again, the context is Brett has just been dressed down by all these experts, and he's going back out and looking carefully. You ready? I'm going to start reading to you now. This is Brett's. A simple alternative to the flood hypothesis is that the main routes of glacial water across the plateau were sequential in operation. In other words, this is what his critics are saying. You can't have all this flood water happening at the same time catastrophically, his critics are saying. They're saying you have a moving ice sheet that's growing and retreating, shifting, bigger and smaller, and you have a bunch of time to bring a bunch of meltwater in glacial rivers of modest amounts to do all this work that you are observing. Back to Brett's. The writer, Brett's, who's talking in the third person, has described the anastomosis as possessing 10 or 12 channel heads on the edge of the glaciated tract, the southern edge of the Spokane ice sheet. If the ice margin could be so shifted that only one or two of these operated at one time, making them sequential in development, the flood scheme would collapse. The flood scheme would collapse. An examination of this conception is not an office task. He's not writing anything like that before 1927. So Brett's is officially pissed. And he's talking pretty much directly at these six dudes who I'm sure he has ringing in his ears every night after that ambush meeting. He starts a paragraph by saying, an examination of this conception is not an office task. There are 5 critical places to be studied in the field. The glaciated plain and channel heads, that's our topic tonight. I'll continue. The divergences and I won't continue. He's got 4 more. Okay, so now he writes to us and he has a very special map that I'm about to show you. A more detailed map of the Mondovi horseshoe, my phrase. Brett's. Restudy of the glaciated plain north of the channel heads has shown that earlier statements concerning moraine records of the ice sheet are correct. There are essentially none. Brett's is saying there's essentially no moraines to look at. There is moraine topography on Sunset Prairie, just west of Spokane, perhaps 40 or 50 hills at Sunset Prairie, a very bouldery till scattered over 10 to 15 square miles. The total relief at Sunset Prairie does not exceed 50 feet. The height of separate hills rarely is more than 25 to 30 feet. When mapped, they are only a circuloid group surrounded by till with even weaker topographic expression. There seems to be no hope of mapping any shifts in the edge of the ice from this evidence. Okay, so far we're not that excited. Next paragraph with a sexy map. North of Davenport, 25 miles west of Sunset Prairie, the glaciated tract is deeply canyoned by tributaries to Spokane and Columbia rivers. Only well down the northern steep slopes is there any moraine topography. Even if could be traced out as a record of ice margins, it's too far north of the channel heads and too low to bear on the question of shifting occupations. His restudy in the summer of 1927 has shown another thing regarding the glaciated tract north of Davenport. It is that the ice sheet did not reach as far south as formerly indicated. What had been taken in earlier reconnaissance for ice-laid till proved to be berg-laid. The divides between the north draining canyons, previously unvisited, were found to carry scarped relict hills of loess, some with scabland floors. The channelways across these divides are roughly transverse to the divides and canyons. You're going to have to read this for yourself to really absorb it. This is me reading this stuff, underlining, coloring, everything, and then, I have to go back and read it 7 more times to really get it. I'm going to finish reading this paragraph and then slow down and really show you this map. The altitudes of scarp bases checked as carefully as possible in the absence of a topographic map. So he didn't have a topographic map base. Getting excited now. He didn't even have a topo as a base map in 1927 for this area. How the hell is he making any kind of reasonable map? And you guys, since the show last night are zooming around on Google Earth and you're like seeing what I was just pointing out with my index finger on his 1928 map. Unbelievable that this guy can do what he's doing without a topographic base map. Are you kidding me? Are with few exceptions higher and farther north. Okay, I got to read one more paragraph. Here between Davenport and Reardon and Mondovi and north, the combination of features here is remarkable. I got to go back. The loess hills have not been glaciated. In their forms, relations to each other, and to the scabland, they appear to be identical with the relict hills of the scabland farther south. Floated erratics have been found among them, but not above 2,560 feet above tide. The associated scabland is not related to the north draining canyons. It occurs only on the divide tops. Southward flow seems clearly indicated. The only conclusion which seems allowable is that the Spokane ice here did not reach the channel heads as formerly mapped, and that there was a broad sheet of water flowing vigorously southward across the scabland to become concentrated in the channel heads. The revised map shows, therefore, only 4 separate spillway tracks from the ice. Then he goes on for also amazing stuff, but that's as much detailed reading as I need to give you from Brett's. You got almost 900 watching? Damn, son. Okay, I'm going to hold this as carefully as I can because you Google Earthers are just going to go nuts now, especially since you have this that you can download as well. So based on his double checking from the summer of 1927, can I hold my elbow on the ice chest here to get this as still as possible? So there's the same color scheme. Purple are towns: Davenport, Reardon, Telford, Creston. Up high are it's the Spokane River. Up here, this is the Columbia. Here's the Spokane flowing into the Columbia. The brown is the scabland, naked basalt. Same color scheme. The white with the yellow trim are the loess hills. And here's our Mondovi horseshoe that is showing up for the first time in any of his work. But when you look at Google Earth or Google Terrain or whatever, even Google Maps, the thing you notice are these canyons that are working their way down to the Spokane River. That's an earlier story than the Ice Age. And so what drew me to this horseshoe to begin with was like, is this a huge ridge or something that the ice sheet is wrapping around? And the answer is no. I double checked a little bit today, and I still think that little horseshoe area is Bald Ridge Road, but some of you weren't convinced that was right. And I'm totally happy to be corrected if we find out that's the case. But this map, which you now have, is more precise and can be the story. Oh, we got Sky Cooley with us too. Wonderful. So is that the end? No, it's not. I'm going to come to those emails just in a second about the backstory of the color map, but I have to do this. So you know what I've been doing, most of you by now. You know that I've been reading on purpose in the 20s and not peeking ahead. Well, this morning I just couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. I had to peek ahead. I guess thinking about tonight with you. And I'm like, I'm still on this Brett Spokane flood thing. I got to peek ahead in his last papers and see if he's totally off of this. And I'm just wasting everybody's time. Well, Brett's last paper was 1969, and there's no map in that last. And I haven't posted it yet, but you can find it if you're real interested. And yes, his title in 1969, what is he? He's over 85 years old at this point. I mean, he is talking about Lake Missoula floods and channeled scabland. And I haven't read this carefully yet, but I scanned it today looking for his talk about the Spokane ice sheet. If he had anything in there in 1969, he's got one paragraph. I hope you got the context. Before I read it, what's my question? Is he in 1969 or in the 1950s, is Brett saying, look, I screwed up. Please forgive me. I was really hot on this Spokane ice and this ice margin just north of Davenport, Washington. And, I just didn't have the right maps. My grad students were terrible. I don't know what. And I'm just anticipating him writing something like, the writer was totally wrong, just kind of like he did in that 1928 paper. He said, well, I've made an adjustment. The writer had an earlier interpretation. He backed off. So in his last paper, in his old age, did Brett finally write that ice over Spokane was dumb? Brett's 1969, glaciation at channel heads. The writer believed, in past tense, that till deposits and subdued moraine forms on that part of the Columbia Plateau between the Spokane and Columbia rivers on the north and the heads of the Cheney, Palouse, and Telford Crab Creek channels on the south recorded glaciation almost up to the channel heads. I mean, we just read it, right? We just read it together from 1928. Richard Foster Flint also saw this area as glaciated. This is Brett's writing in 1969. He's naming Flint. Flint also saw this area as glaciated. Gerald Richmond, has dismissed this view and sees the tract as flood swept. But the total lack of isolated residual hills of loess, so prominent a feature of flood erosion elsewhere on the plateau, seems to argue for glacial rather than flood removal. Perhaps both events occurred glaciation before flooding. And that's all I'm asking. Do you remember? Did you see the Moses Cooley video? Where I'm walking around on the talus and then I finally get this thing out as I'm sitting, this has on my lap. I've got one hand with the gizmo and I'm saying, do we need two maps? Do we need an older map with the Spokane ice coming down to Mondovi and then going back? And then do we need to bring in the Wisconsin ice, not as far, and have all this water? Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I think in Brett's last paper, he's still saying there was ice down at Mondovi. And yeah, there's some ice rafted erratics, and there's Glacial Lake Columbia and everything else, but that's not at the same time. And Richmond is taking my ice out of there because he's just assuming everything's happening at the same time. Backstory on the creation of this map, published by the American Geographical Society of New York. According to Vic Baker, a very snooty organization that charged top dollar for anybody to buy one of these maps, including Brett's. So Brett's had to like borrow money to buy one of his own maps, according to Vic Baker. So this is Ian by email finding these letters. I'm going to read portions of them to you right now. 1927, May. So this is 4 months after the ambush meeting. Isaiah Brown from New York writes Professor Bretz. Dear Professor Bretz, I have read with much interest your paper entitled Channeled Scabland and the Spokane Flood. I saw a part of this region in 1912, and my interest in it has been heightened by everything that I've heard and read about it since that time. Basically, he says, would you like to write an article for our publication, and we can offer you a small honorarium of $10 per 1,000 words, paid to the contributors, like you. Would you give this consideration to the request and let me know if you can undertake the paper? Sincerely yours, Isaiah Bowman, Director of the American Geographical Society of New York. It's a longer letter. I'm just grabbing certain spots. I'm just taking parts of these letters and getting ready to read them to you. May 17th, 1927. Dear Dr. Bowman, this is Brett's writing. This is on his University of Chicago letterhead. I have your letter concerning my work of the channeled scablands. I have already published 5 articles. Here's a lecture that was chiefly a summary of my data and hypotheses for the purpose of critical discussion by the Geological Society of Washington, the ambush meeting 4 months earlier. As you will note in the Journal of the Washington Academy, there is plenty of criticism among the USGS men regarding my conclusions. My faith is still vigorous, however, and I now know what kind of evidence these men required and shall get it next summer of 1927, if it exists. I'm enclosing my map from 1923 without the whoop-de-doo. I shall doubtless revise this map to some extent this summer, 1927. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I shall not forget it and will get in touch with you probably next October on the matter. They swap letters back and forth. Here's the map that we know from 1923 that Bretz is sending this guy. Okay, now we're in October of 1927. I hope you're still with us. Yeah, we almost have 1,000. Okay, so you're enjoying this. That's great. I think this is just a blast. And thanks to many of you who emailed all sorts of things. Nobody found a photo, by the way, from 1928 in the dedication of Dry Falls. I heard from some photography people who said that was the vintage where you were done with wet plates, and if it was 105 degrees, you couldn't take photos easily without the whole thing melting or something. So they doubted, the photography people doubted that there really is a photo from that event. Okay. This is the best part right here. Brett's after his summer field season of 1927. Dear Dr. Bowman, you wrote me last May asking if I would write an article on the channeled scablands. You will recall that I wanted to have another field season of study before doing so, and that I promised to write you on my return from the field. You will further recall that certain men of the United States Geological Survey had vigorously and adversely criticized my interpretations and had printed their comments. Under separate cover, I am sending you a still later criticism, distinctly challenging my ideas. I went into the field this summer, 1927, believing that I was right, despite the chorus of disapproval, but determined to keep my eyes singled out for the truth, to increase greatly my stock of detailed information, to consider every detail in the light of every alternative hypothesis that had been suggested by these critics, or that I could invent, to get quantitative data as far as possible, to find new categories of facts, if I could, and to bring home a solution so well worked out that it could not be challenged. This past summer was remarkably fruitful. This is Brett's talking to Isaiah Bowman in New York City. I made a 10,000-mile traverse of the area. I doubled my stock of observations, bringing back notes which now fill 150 single-space typed sheets, about 100 photographs, and much map data. I found new categories of facts. I found new and significant criteria. I sharpened older ones, and I came home convinced that no other hypothesis than that of the Spokane flood will ever explain the channeled scablands. Mic drop. I can now meet almost every objection raised with evidence incontrovertible. I have convincing evidence that scarcely one of the suggested alternatives can possibly fit the facts. I frankly confess to a certain glee as I start work this fall to deal with the new data and new ideas. I gave particular attention this summer to additions and revisions of my map, the Horseshoe, among other things, and can now make a map which will measure up to the best standards of your publication and society, and that will probably not need a revision until the whole region is topographically mapped. It will be a startling map. This guy's loving life at the moment after that criticism 6 months earlier. The anastomosis shown on the older map fell considerably short of showing it all. I can now elaborate my aerial classifications and boundaries and provide numerous well-checked altitudes for the upper limits of the flood, altitudes that will be distributed over the plateau. I can almost promise to contour the surface of the Great Flood. I promise I'm almost done. That part of the Columbia Plateau affected by the channeled scablands is unique. There is no topography like it. Startling as some things are, like the Grand Coulee, the relations in the ensemble are even more amazing. They seem so utterly fantastic that I am not surprised that doubting Thomases rise up here and there. As a result of this summer's work, I have modified some of my previously announced interpretations. The general net result is to demand more of a flood than less. They go on to go back and forth about making the beautiful colored map that is the thing that started all of this inquiry for me, and now for you as well. The Mondovi Horseshoe, visited and realized for the first time in the summer of 1927, one of 15,000 miles or whatever he said. I don't know. All right, it's time for some live Q&A. I sincerely thank you all again for all the emails. I don't have the time to reply to everybody, most everybody. but it really is fun to follow all those leads that you have. And special thanks to the couple of folks that there's tons from Sharon here tonight as well, but I think I need to cut it here. Uppercase, please, for your questions about Brett's, about the timing, about the horseshoe, about clarification on any of this. And it looks like Sky and maybe Jerome are answering questions as well to some. They're the experts. They're the geologists here. Frank, so the horseshoe is loose, so caps basalt and had no ice on it? I don't know, Frank. Between these different maps, it's not clear to me why the horseshoe exists. As I think about it right now, there is no big topographic ridge that the ice sheet is wrapping around. That's what I assumed it was. But, and I don't think I'm going to be able to find it. I kind of read it, I guess. Even in 1969, Brett's is saying, okay, much of eastern Washington is a bunch of loose hills with clearly defined channels where the loess is gone. So that's where you've got the running water. But he says, once you get north of my blue line, once you get north of my ice margin at the Mondovi Horseshoe or any of these other places, the loess is either gone or it's very thin. And so why are you saying, I guess he's talking to Richmond, why are you saying there's a bunch of water running through the area when the water running through the area is so clearly the channeled scablands? Like, there are no channeled scablands north of my margin. I guess that's what Brett's is saying. And so he says, if it's, at least in the earlier papers, Brett says, we have this huge basaltic plain. And we don't have the basalt, we don't have the loose hills there because the ice sheet took the loess away. They just bulldozed it. So if you're confused about why the horseshoe shape, I am too. And in another report that I'll never find at the moment it's probably out here someplace, he was finding decent moraine or till like on the way down to the Spokane River, like down there in one of those deep channels. I think is there one called Deep Canyon? Yeah. Thanks for the question. I don't think I answered it. Janet, when I go there, what do I look for? Yeah, well, I went over on Tuesday. I thought I'd find something obvious. There was nothing obvious. So I don't know what the answer is. Now, for all I know, there's going to be an avalanche of more emails and imagery from people with real incredible toolkits like some of you, and maybe you'll be able to take these maps from Brett's, who wasn't using a topographic base. Again, I'm stunned by that. And maybe able to come up with some imagery. Oh, you know what, though? I got to share this with you. I got to share this with you. Okay, I not only cheated and peeked ahead to 1969 with Brett's, I cheated again. And I found this paper that Jerome Lessman was talking about, written by Chad Pritchard and David Gaylord and others. So Pritchard's at Eastern Washington University. This is a paper 3 years old. And David Gaylord's a longtime quaternary person at Washington State. And these guys took all the test holes or drill holes, groundwater. That's how much I know about groundwater. The well cuttings or whatever from these thousands and thousands and thousands of wells near the Spokane airport, where apparently they've had contamination problems. And they're able to see what's underneath the surface, underneath the Wisconsin aged glacial lake beds. and the Marshall Paleochannel, and the Airway Heights Paleochannel, and the West Deep Creek Paleochannel. That's where Brett's has some moraine, I guess, in Deep Creek Paleochannel. The Airport Paleochannel. I don't know, are these subglacial channels underneath the Spokane ice sheet that then feed directly into the channeled scablands? Like, this is what Brett's is mapping. He's like, I know where the channels are. I know where the heads of these channels are. But Brett's in 1927 says, okay, I can't bring the ice sheet right up to these heads of these channels. I don't have the evidence for it, but I've got moraine stuff over here by Mondovi. So even a map like this, to me, looks like 2 generations. The red channels should be blue because that's Spokane, baby. And then, yeah, this is the same place that we're bringing Missoula water in during the Wisconsin time. I don't want to be too stubborn about this. And, you know, I'm going to be one of these cranks who like reads everything from this point forward. I'm like, there we go again. 2 generations, Spokane, Wisconsin. See, told you. I don't want to be that person. But I am currently. By the way, Sky's with us, and Sky sent me this. Sky and I are going to meet up on a Saturday or a Sunday in a couple of weeks, and we're going to visit all these old places where there are pre-Wisconsin flood gravels. We're going to make a video. Papageno, is the Reardon Arc subglacial flow formed? I don't know. The Reardon Arc. Are you asking about the Horseshoe? No, I don't think though. I don't. So some of you were really gun-ho and emailing me since last night and saying, oh, I see the Horseshoe, and that's like Niagara Falls, you know, I can see a horseshoe-shaped cliff. I'm not saying that, and Brett's wasn't saying that either. We're not saying with this Mondovi Horseshoe that that's some sort of cliff where water's going over the top of it. I can see why you're going in that direction if you are, but he's just mapping till or glacial deposits or lack of loose hills to the north. But it's still confusing to me why it's such a tiny little kink when the rest of the margin, oh, that's another thing. So on the 1928 map that we're focusing on today, when you're a geology mapper, you put a solid line when you're sure. And he has a solid line. He's sure that's the southern margin of the ice sheet going all the way around the Horseshoe. But when you're a mapper, you make it dashed if you're not sure. And he's not sure. He's calling it the approximate margin of the Spokane ice. He's only got one other place where it's a solid line, and that's just to the east of the Deep Creek area, I guess. He's got a solid line at the Horseshoe. Why? More than 1,000. Wow. I'm still live, I think. What possible forces could stop an ice sheet like that other than a ridge feature? Good question. I'm not a person to ask her it, probably. It makes me wonder how thick the ice was. Like I think some glacial geologists are usually talking about an ice sheet getting thinner and thinner as you get to the margin. So it's not like you have this ice sheet that's 2 miles thick and then suddenly it just screeches to a halt. I don't think that's common. So we might not have ice that's more than 500 feet thick or something. I don't know. But then, yes, is it really just a loose hill that's going to stop this ice sheet? Or are we even thinking about it correctly? You just run out of ice mass, and that's the end of the line? It's a good question. I don't know how to answer it. Jerome says, yes, very thin at the margin. Thank you, Jerome. Scrolling back, we'll do a few more. I'm having too much fun. I guess we're still functional, huh? You must, if we got more than 1,000, I guess we're still working here. Was loess removed or never there? Had ice formed instead of loess? Ice duration. Another really good question. It's almost like a map needs to be made, and I don't think I'm the one to do it unless I just use colored pencils. I'll just do it with my hands, I guess. There's a lot going on in this area west of Spokane. Can I do it with my hands? I guess I'll do it here. So what do we have? We've got the ice sheet coming down 130,000 years ago and then backing up. Fine. But is it coming down over geology that's all the same? No. We have a margin up in here that's the northern margin of the basalt. So it's like this crossroads area. The basalt was here first. The northern edge of the basalt is like this. Then the ice sheet comes down. Does the ice sheet decide it doesn't like flowing over basalt or something? And you're asking about the loess, and I guess my question is, never had the thought till right now. Brett's and pretty much everybody says that, look, all this basalt had a continuous mantle of loess. It was just a continuous sheet of cocaine sitting on top of the German chocolate cake. Okay. But how about north of the basalt? How about north of the German chocolate cake? Was there any loess up there? Is loess only piling up? Is the cocaine only piling up on the cake? Does that matter? A takeaway, I guess, and again, he's still saying it in 1969, a takeaway is there's a landscape that is clearly floodwater scouring through kitchen flour. And nobody's saying the ice was on top of that. But then north of Mondovi, north of Davenport, north of Reardon, and please remember, I'm just getting started thinking about this, and I've barely been up there, so I'm no authority. But he says the loess hills are gone. What are you going to do? Why are the loess hills gone? They're still basalt. That's the way to say it, I guess. North of Mondovi, there's still a bunch of loess, apparently. No, sorry. North of Mondovi, before the Spokane time, was there a bunch more loess up there? I think that's what Brett's is saying. Okay, I think I finally have it. This beer is helping me. What if the loess was only on the German chocolate cake, all the way up to the northern edge of the German chocolate cake? That's north of Spokane. So what if that continuous mantle of cocaine was on top of the German chocolate cake all the way up to Chewelah or wherever the northern margin is up there? If we go in with that and assume that, then Brett says, why don't we have any loess hills north of the Spokane River, if that's true? And if there's no loess hills up there north of the Spokane River, Brett says, that's my evidence for an ice sheet. The ice sheet bulldozed it away. And then Richmond comes in the 1960s and said, no. All that loess got taken away by the Ice Age floods. He says, no, I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like south of Reardon when you have floodwater coming through and taking loess away. It doesn't take all the hills away. But all the hills north of Spokane River are gone, made of loess. On June 25th, 2023, that's my view of it. We'll see if we change. 3 more and we're done. Isn't the Lus an artifact of earlier ice sheets? Okay, you guys are great. Sky Cooley, I guess, is still with us. Listened to the podcast yesterday morning, pulled off to the side of the road in Montana and fired off an email with all sorts of thoughts. Super helpful as always. And he's saying, look, there's different generations of Lus. It wasn't all piled up there before the first Ice Age flood. And that's always bugged me, to be honest. I think before I went on a field trip over by Washtuckna with Carl Lilquist and a bus full of people in 2012 or something, before I went on that trip, I just assumed everything in the Palouse, all that Lus was pre-glacial. And then I'm like, well, that doesn't work. I thought the Lus, why is the Lus there to begin with? Isn't the Lus kitchen flour that was ground up by the glacier and then flushed out onto the outwash plain and then blown? Well, then it depends who you talk to. Some people say, well, no, the Lus is older than the ice sheet, older than the ice age, and the reason the Lus is there because the underlying ringgold formation. So there's all sorts of clues just in the Lus. And I think there's Spokane ice sheet vintage identified in the Lus. I think this winter's not going to be enough. I can't do this all in 26 episodes. And you'd think if we were doing the exotic terrains, there'd be no way you could do that in 26 episodes. I'm now starting to realize that this is not just an Ice Age flood live stream series this winter. I guess I'm announcing it officially. It's not just Brett's. It's not just Ice Age floods. It's the Lus. It's the landscape of the pre-glacial drainages before the Ice Age. What do those river valleys look like? So now we're back 10 million years ago. Don't you have to set the stage before you can bring in the first Ice Age flood, whenever that was? Wow. I guess another way to say it, I'm feeling good right now, by the way. Thank you for still being here. I think another way to say it is that I was heavy into the Ice Age flood, Ellensburg chapter, and everything we were doing is Ice Age floods. And I think after about 6 or 7 years of that, I figured I kind of had it all figured out. I'd been to all the spots. It kind of culminated with a field trip with Vic Baker, and that's where I met Jerome Lessman and Lisa Ely and David Gaylord and a bunch of those folks. Chad Pritchard was there. I think after 2016, I just said, well, you know, I've been to all those spots. I kind of get it. But here's the point. I had it all figured out, or at least I was familiar with all the storylines and all the phrases and all the things I kept hearing over and over within the Wisconsin. So besides teaching a couple of lectures every quarter in 101 about the Ice Age floods, really haven't thought about the Ice Age at all, Ice Age floods. And Tom passed away tragically in March of 2020, so that didn't help. But I'm back in because there's this whole older chapter. That's enough. A toast to you. Here's for being here with us tonight. Here's to your health. Here's to everyone that's participating live with us and people that are participating by viewing or maybe even leaving a comment days, weeks, months, even years in the future. Here's to you and your interest. Here's to curious people, people that are enjoy learning new things, and occasionally people who are motivated if something just doesn't sound right and you want to dig in a little deeper. And I think for many of us, that's what we're doing right now. Who knows where it will lead, but it's really fun along the way. Good night from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure when I'll see you next, but I wish nothing but the best to you from here in the backyard in Ellensburg, Washington, USA. I love you. Thank you, and goodbye.